The motel sign flickered above them like it was too tired to keep shining. Russell and Elaine thought their children had brought them there for a quiet 3-day rest. But by morning, the car was gone. The phones were silent, and every bank card they had stopped working. All they had left was one small bag, an old jacket, and a woman at the front desk who noticed too much to look away. Then Elaine found a bank envelope hidden in the lining of Russell's coat. It did not just explain why they were abandoned, it revealed who had been quietly taking control of their lives. If this story touches you, tell us where you're watching from, leave your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep writing more meaningful stories. The first thing I noticed was the sign, not the room. Not the smell of old carpet or the cracked asphalt in the parking lot. Not even the way my daughter Melissa kept checking her phone while pretending to be cheerful. It was the sign, Pine Lantern Motel. Half the letters were working. The P blinked like it was struggling to stay alive, and the word lantern glowed in tired orange against the late afternoon sky. Behind it stood a row of rooms with faded green doors, an ice machine humming beside the office, and a narrow strip of grass that looked as though no one had cared enough to water it since spring. My wife Elaine reached over and squeezed my hand. "Russell," she said softly. "It's only for a few days." I looked at her. 66 years old, silver hair pinned neatly behind her ears, a blue cardigan folded across her lap, even though the car was warm. Elaine had always believed in making the best of things. If the coffee was burned, she called it strong. If the roof leaked, she said, at least we knew where the weak spot was. If our children forgot to call for 3 weeks, she said they were probably busy. That was Elaine's gift. And sometimes I feared her punishment. Our oldest son, Grant, pulled the SUV into a space near room 12 and shut off the engine. He was 50 years old and still had the impatience of a man who believed every room he entered was wasting his time. His hair was trimmed close at the sides, his watch was too large, and his smile had become something he put on only when he needed cooperation. "Here we are," he said, clapping his hands once. "Fresh air, peace and quiet. No chores, no stairs. You two are going to thank us by Sunday." Melissa was already out of the passenger side, smoothing her blouse and scanning the motel as if she worried someone she knew might see her. She had her mother's eyes, but not her softness. There was always calculation in Melissa's face, a little narrowing of attention before she said anything important. Owen, our youngest, opened the rear hatch without a word. He had driven separately and arrived behind us in his pickup. He was 43, broad-shouldered, restless. The kind of man who could never stand still long enough for an honest conversation. He pulled out our small duffel bag and set it on the curb. One bag. Elaine had packed lightly because Melissa said there was no need to bring much. "Just comfortable clothes," she had told her mother over the phone. "Maybe a sweater. It's not a move, Mom. It's a rest." Arrest. That was what they called it. For the past month, all 3 of them had been saying we needed one. Grant said the farm was wearing us down. Melissa said Elaine looked tired. Owen said I was getting stubborn about things that did not matter anymore. The farm had been ours for 41 years. It had a gravel drive, a red pump house, 2 tired barns, and a porch Elaine used to decorate with hanging ferns every May. I knew every warped board in the place. I knew which pipe knocked when the upstairs bathroom ran. I knew which step on the back porch complained in winter. A man does not live somewhere for 4 decades without the walls learning his weight. But lately our children had stopped calling it home. They called it the property. Grant came around with pamphlets about senior living. Melissa sent articles about older adults and fall risks. Owen walked the fence line one Saturday and said, "Dad, this place is more liability than legacy." I should have listened harder to that word, liability. But Elaine had wanted peace. She wanted one weekend where the children were not arguing about repairs, taxes, insurance, and what would happen when the time came. She wanted to believe this little trip was kindness. So I stepped out of the SUV and said nothing. That was something people often misunderstood about me. Silence does not mean agreement. I spent 32 years as an internal auditor for the Federal Railway System. I learned early that the loudest person in the room was usually trying to outrun the numbers. My work was patient work. You sat with files. You checked dates. You looked for the figure that did not belong. You waited for a lie to reveal its shape. But that afternoon, standing under the broken motel sign while my children smiled too brightly, I was not an auditor. I was just an old man trying not to disappoint his wife. Grant went into the office and returned with 2 key cards in a paper sleeve. He handed one to Elaine. "Not me. Room 12, he said. "Paid through Saturday morning. We'll come back after breakfast, get you both. Maybe take a drive around the lake." "Saturday?" I asked. He glanced at me. "3 nights, Dad. That's what we said." "No," I said. "You said a few days." Melissa laughed lightly. The way people do when they want a correction to sound like a misunderstanding. "That is a few days." Elaine looked from her to me. "It's fine, Russ. 3 nights will be nice." Owen set the duffel inside the room and came back out, wiping his hands on his jeans though the bag was clean. "There's a diner about a mile down," he said, "and a gas station on the other side." "I didn't see a gas station open," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe it closes early." Grant checked his phone again. "Listen, we need to head back. There's a meeting in the morning. But you have everything you need. Water, sandwiches in the mini fridge, TV remote, towels. Mom, your medicine is in the side pocket of the bag." Elaine smiled at them, trying to make the moment warm enough for everyone. "Thank you, sweetheart." Grant kissed the air near her cheek. Melissa hugged her quickly. Owen gave her shoulder a squeeze. No one hugged me until Elaine noticed and said, "Aren't you going to say goodbye to your father?" There was a small pause. "Not long. Just long enough." Grant turned and gave me a stiff embrace that smelled of expensive cologne and impatience. Melissa kissed my cheek without letting her hand touch my arm. Owen nodded and said, "Take it easy, Dad. Take it easy." As if ease were something a person could be ordered into, they left in 2 vehicles, Grant's SUV first, Owen's pickup behind it. Elaine stood beside me and waved until both sets of taillights disappeared past the curve of the highway. I did not wave. I watched the road after they were gone. There are moments in life when nothing has happened yet, but your body knows more than your mind is willing to admit. The air changes. The light sits wrong. A normal sound becomes too loud. The ice machine clicked beside the office. A semi-truck passed on the highway, pushing wind across the parking lot. Elaine slipped her hand through my arm. "Don't start worrying," she said. "Please. I want this to be nice." So I swallowed what I felt. For her, I swallowed it. Room 12 was clean enough. 2 double beds with brown covers, a small table by the window, a television mounted slightly crooked on the wall. The air conditioner rattled every time it kicked on. There was a framed print of a lake above the dresser, though the lake looked more like a pond behind an office park. Elaine unpacked our clothes into one drawer. I told her there was no need. "It makes it feel less temporary," she said. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. We ate the sandwiches Melissa had packed. Turkey on wheat, a little dry, wrapped in wax paper. Elaine made tea in the microwave using water from the bathroom sink. We watched an old game show without really watching. Outside, the motel settled into evening. Doors opened and closed. A man coughed 2 rooms down. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then gave up. Elaine fell asleep before 10. I sat by the window with the curtain cracked open and looked at the parking lot. I thought of the farm, not the whole thing. Just small parts. The brass hook by the back door where Elaine hung her gardening hat. The pencil marks inside the pantry door where we had once measured the children's height before they were old enough to be ashamed of needing us. The oak desk in the den where I kept tax records, warranty papers, bank statements, and every receipt over $25. I had always believed that if I kept things in order, life could not surprise me too badly. That was the arrogance of a careful man. The next morning, Elaine woke cheerful. She put on her blue cardigan, brushed her hair, and said we should take a walk before breakfast. I did not tell her I had slept only 3 hours. We walked the length of the motel and back. The air smelled of damp pine, hot asphalt, and coffee from the office. A few rooms had work trucks parked out front. Men in boots came and went, carrying thermoses and lunch coolers. At 8:15, I called Grant. No answer. At 8:20, I called Melissa. Straight to voicemail. At 8:22, I called Owen. It rang once, then stopped. Elaine watched me from the edge of the bed. "They're probably driving," she said. "Probably." At 9, I walked to the office. The woman behind the counter was wiping down a coffee machine with a gray cloth. She was in her 50s, maybe, with tired eyes, thick brown hair pulled into a loose knot, and the posture of someone who had spent a long time standing because sitting down would mean feeling everything at once. Her name tag read Deborah. "Morning," she said. "Morning. I'm in room 12. Russell Whitmore." She nodded and looked at the computer. "Everything all right with the room?" "The room is fine. I just wanted to check the reservation. My son handled it." Her fingers moved over the keyboard. "Whitmore. Room 12. Yes, sir. Paid through Saturday. Check out at 11. Nothing after that?" She looked at me then, not suspiciously, carefully. "No, sir. 3 nights prepaid." I kept my face still. "Did he leave a card on file?" "No." "A phone number?" She checked again. "Only yours." "Mine." I thanked her and walked back to the room. Elaine was standing by the window when I came in. She had her hands clasped in front of her. "Russ, they paid for 3 nights," I said. "No card on file." Her face changed slowly, like a light dimming behind a curtain. "Maybe they forgot." "Maybe." I took out my wallet and removed my debit card. "I'll pay for a few extra days. Just until we sort this out." Elaine nodded too quickly. Relief needs very little evidence when fear is near. I returned to the office and handed Deborah the card. She ran it once, then again. Her expression did not change, but I saw the slight hesitation in her hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "It's declining." "That can't be right. Do you have another one?" "I had a credit card. It declined too." "A second credit card. Declined." I felt a strange heat move up the back of my neck. Not embarrassment exactly. Something sharper. Something older. "Could be the system," Deborah said, though her voice told me she did not believe it. "Could be." I stepped aside and opened the banking app on my phone. The little wheel spun, then asked me to log in again. I entered my password. Incorrect. I entered it more slowly. Incorrect. I requested a verification code. The message never came. For the first time that morning, my hand shook. Not much. Just enough that I put the phone in my pocket before Deborah could see it. "Thank you," I said. "I'll come back." Outside, the sun was already high. Trucks roared by on the highway as if the whole world had somewhere to go. I stood in the parking lot and looked at room 12. Elaine was behind the curtain. I could see only her shape, small and still, waiting for me to return with an answer kind enough to live with. I had spent my life finding the difference between error and intent. An error leaves loose ends. Intent ties them. Nukar. No card on file. No answered calls. No working bank access. 3 nights. Exactly 3. I walked back slowly, each step sounding too loud on the cracked asphalt. When I opened the door, Elaine turned toward me with hope already fading in her eyes. "Well?" she asked. I wanted to lie. A husband should be able to give his wife comfort, even if comfort is only a temporary roof against the weather. But I had built my life on not lying to numbers, and at 68 years old, I could not begin lying to the woman who had trusted me for 44 years. I sat beside her on the edge of the bed. "The cards don't work," I said. She looked down at her hands. I waited for her to ask what that meant. I waited for her to cry, or defend them, or say again that there had to be an explanation. Instead, she said something I did not expect. "Russell," she whispered, "did our children leave us here?" The room was quiet, except for the air conditioner rattling in the wall. I looked at the one duffel bag in the open drawer. I looked at the 2 paper cups by the microwave. I looked at the key card lying on the table. Thin and white and temporary. Then I took her hand. "I don't know yet," I said. But that was not the truth. Not completely. The truth was that a part of me already knew, and by the time the 3rd night came, I feared the rest of me would have no choice but to catch up. By the 3rd morning, the room had changed shape, not physically. Room 12 was still the same narrow box with 2 double beds, a crooked television, a rattling air conditioner, and a framed picture of a lake that looked like it had never known weather. But the room no longer felt temporary. It felt like a waiting room. Elaine and I moved quietly inside it, as if loud footsteps might make the truth arrive sooner. She folded and refolded the same 2 blouses. I checked my phone more times than I care to admit. Grant did not answer. Melissa did not answer. Owen did not answer. Their silence had become so complete it felt less like absence and more like architecture. I tried calling from the motel office once, thinking maybe they had blocked my number or maybe my phone was the problem. Deborah let me use the landline without asking questions. Grant's number rang 6 times and went to voicemail. Melissa's went straight there. Owens produced a sharp little message saying the subscriber was unavailable. I placed the receiver back in the cradle. Deborah was behind the counter, sorting small packets of sugar into a plastic tray. She did not look at me right away. That was something I noticed about her. She had the rare kindness of not watching a person while he was being humiliated. "Any luck?" she asked. "No." She nodded once. Not pitying, not surprised. The office smelled of burned coffee, floor cleaner, and the faint sweetness of the cinnamon air freshener clipped to the air vent. A bell hung above the front door, though it made more of a tired clink than a ring when people came in. Behind Deborah, on a corkboard, were handwritten notes, maintenance reminders, a faded postcard of Branson, and a photograph of a younger woman standing beside an older one in front of a rose bush. I looked at that photograph longer than I meant to. Deborah followed my gaze. "My mother," she said. I should have looked away, but something in her voice held me there. "She looks kind." She was. Deborah slipped another sugar packet into the tray. "Too kind. Some days." I knew what she meant before she explained it. Kindness, in the wrong family, becomes a language everyone knows how to exploit. I thanked her for the phone and started back toward the room, but she stopped me before I reached the door. "Mr. Whitmore." I turned. "Checkout is tomorrow at 11. "I know." She pressed her lips together. She was not a tall woman, but there was a firmness about her, the kind that comes from carrying more than people assume. Her motel polo shirt was faded at the collar. A pencil held her hair in a loose knot. Her hands were rough, the nails trimmed short. No polish. She looked like someone who had learned not to dress up hardship. "I just wanted to make sure you knew," she said. "I do. I'm not trying to rush you. I understand." But I did not understand. Not really. I understood policies. I understood bills. I understood that motel rooms were not shelters, and kindness did not pay property tax. What I did not understand was how to tell my wife that at 11 o'clock the next morning, we might have to stand beside the highway with one bag and no destination. When I returned to room 12, Elaine was sitting at the table with a paper cup of tea cooling in front of her. She had pulled the curtain halfway open. Sunlight came through in a pale strip and fell across her hands. "Did they answer?" she asked. I shook my head. She looked back out the window. Maybe something happened. There it was again. That last little bridge she kept building for them. Maybe something happened. Maybe they had trouble with the car. Maybe one of them lost their phone. Maybe 3 grown people had vanished for reasons that still allowed them to be decent. I wanted to let her keep it. Instead, I sat across from her. "Elaine." She closed her eyes. Just that. Just her name. And she knew what I was asking her to face. "I'm not ready to say it," she whispered. "All right. I know what it looks like. I know. But if I say it out loud, then they become the kind of children who could do this." I had no answer for that. A man can repair wiring, balance ledgers, rebuild a porch, file appeals, read tax code until his eyes burn. But there is no manual for the moment your wife realizes the people she nursed through fevers and heartbreaks have left her in a motel like an unwanted suitcase. So I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. Around noon, I walked to the diner Owen had mentioned. It was more than a mile. Maybe a mile and a half. The shoulder of the road was narrow, and trucks passed close enough to tug at my jacket. The gas station Owen claimed was on the other side had been closed long enough for weeds to grow through the cracks by the pumps. A handwritten sign on the door said, "Out of business." The letters had faded in the sun. The diner was open, but I did not go in. I stood outside and looked through the window at men eating fried eggs and biscuits under a mounted deer head. I had $12 in cash. $12. And some change. Enough for breakfast for one person, maybe two if we were careful. Not enough to pretend things were normal. I turned around and walked back. By the time I reached the motel, my knees ached and my shirt clung to my back. Elaine was not in the room. For one panicked second, I thought she had gone looking for me. Then I saw her through the office window, standing at the counter with Deborah. Elaine had one hand pressed to her chest. Deborah was listening to her the way a person listens in church, head slightly bowed, all attention, no interruption. I stopped outside the glass. My first instinct was embarrassment. I did not want strangers knowing our shame. I did not want my wife explaining that our own children had driven away and left us with disconnected cards and no way home. Then Elaine turned her head, and I saw her face. She was not ashamed. She was exhausted. That was worse. I went inside. Deborah looked from her to me. Mrs. Whitmore was asking if there's a laundromat nearby. Elaine gave me a small, apologetic smile. I thought I should wash what we have. What we have. Not our clothes. Not the things we packed. What we have. Deborah hesitated, then reached under the counter and pulled out a small ring of keys. There were only 3 keys on it, and one had a strip of blue tape around the top. I have a washer in the back, she said. It's for motel linens, but there's no rule against using it for real people. Elaine's eyes filled before she could stop them. Oh, I couldn't. You can, Deborah said. And you will. Because that little washer already makes enough noise to wake the dead. So it might as well do some good. It was the first time I heard humor in her voice. Not cheerful humor. Dry, worn, stubborn humor. The kind people use when tenderness feels too exposed. She led us through a door behind the office into a narrow hallway that smelled of detergent and hot metal. The back of the motel was not meant for guests. Shelves leaned under stacks of towels. A mop bucket sat in one corner. There were boxes of light bulbs, spare shower curtains, a toolbox, and an old vending machine with its front panel removed. The laundry room was barely large enough for 3 people. Deborah showed Elaine where to put the detergent. Then she looked at me. There's coffee in the office if you want it. It's terrible, but it's free. I've had worse. I doubt that. I almost smiled. Elaine took our duffel bag and began sorting clothes on top of the dryer. She moved slowly, carefully, as though each shirt required permission. I stood in the doorway, feeling useless. The washer thumped as Deborah started it. Then Deborah picked up my brown jacket from the pile. Does this go in? She asked. No, I said. Just hang it over a chair. It's old. Elaine reached for it. I'll shake it out first. The jacket had been with me for almost 15 years. Canvas, lined for fall weather, frayed at one cuff. Elaine had patched the inside pocket twice because I used to carry receipts there, folded too thick, corners wearing through the fabric. She slipped her hand inside the left pocket, then frowned. What is it? I asked. There's something caught. She turned the pocket inside out as far as it would go. Nothing came loose. Her fingers moved along the seam, pressing gently. Russ. The lining is torn here. I stepped closer. I didn't put anything in there. I know. She worked 2 fingers into the opening and slowly pulled out a white envelope, bent almost in half. The paper had softened at the edges, as if it had been hidden there for days or weeks, carried unknowingly against my side. For a moment none of us spoke. Deborah turned off the washer. The sudden silence was louder than the machine had been. Elaine held the envelope in both hands. It bore the blue logo of the bank back home. Our bank. The one with the brick building on Main Street, 2 blocks from the courthouse. The one where I had opened my first checking account after Elaine and I married. My name was typed across the front. Russell A. Whitmore. Below it was our old mailing address. Not the motel. Not a forwarding address. Home. My mouth went dry. Open it, Elaine said. I took the envelope from her. My fingers were steadier than I felt. That is an old habit. When something dangerous is in your hand, you do not let the hand confess before the mind understands. The flap had already been opened. Not torn. Opened. Someone had seen this before me. Inside was a single folded notice. I spread it carefully on top of the dryer. It was a confirmation letter regarding my federal retirement payment. The words were ordinary. Efficient. Cold in the way official language is cold. The monthly deposit was still active. The amount was unchanged. The transfer schedule was unchanged. But the receiving account had been updated. I read the line once. Then again. Elaine leaned closer. Russ? The account name was printed in clean black letters. Whitmore Family Care Trust. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Anger is hot. Anger moves fast. This was colder than anger. This was recognition. I had spent a lifetime reading paper trails, and I knew the feeling of a false door opening in a wall everyone else thought was solid. The motel. The cards. The 3-night reservation. The unanswered calls. They were no longer separate facts. They were not bad luck. They were not confusion. They were pieces. Elaine touched the paper with one finger, as if contact might change what it said. What is that? She asked. A trust, I said. We have a trust? No. Deborah stood near the washer, quiet as a witness. Elaine looked at me then, and I saw fear move through her face. Not fear of sleeping in a motel. Not fear of money. Something deeper. The fear that the people you love have been talking about your life in rooms where you were not invited. Could the children have set it up to help us? She asked. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted, even then, to find one honest explanation and hand it to her like a blanket. But the envelope had been opened, then hidden, not mailed to us, not discussed with us, hidden in the lining of my jacket, where I might never find it, unless cloth tore and chance took pity. I folded the notice once and placed it back on the dryer. They did something, I said, and they didn't want us to know. Elaine sat down on a plastic laundry basket because her knees seemed to lose their strength. Deborah moved quickly, not fussing, just placing a steady hand under her elbow. Easy, she said. Elaine looked up at her, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't be. That was all Deborah said, but the way she said it changed the room. Until that moment, she had been a motel owner helping 2 stranded guests. Kind, yes. Concerned, yes. But still outside the circle of our private collapse. Now she was inside it. Not because we invited her, because the truth had become too heavy for only 2 people to hold. Deborah picked up the bank notice and read only the top portion, careful not to pry beyond what was already visible. Her jaw tightened. My mother had papers like this, she said quietly. Elaine looked at her. Deborah stared at the bank logo as if it were a face she recognized. Different bank. Different words. Same smell. What happened to her? I asked. Deborah folded the paper back along its crease and handed it to me. My brothers said she was getting confused. They moved her to a facility outside Springfield, told me it was temporary while they fixed her house. Her voice stayed even, but her eyes did not. By the time I found out the house had been sold, she had stopped asking when she was going home. Elaine covered her mouth. I'm sorry, I said. Deborah nodded once, accepting the words without making a ceremony of them. She died 6 months later, she said. Not from sickness, far as I'm concerned, from being put away. The room held that sentence. The washer clicked as if remembering it had a job, then began to fill again. Water rushed through the pipes behind the wall. Outside, somewhere near the office, A car door slammed and a guest laughed at something ordinary. Deborah looked at me. "Mr. Whitmore, do you have somewhere to go tomorrow?" I did not answer right away. A truthful man learns that silence can be mercy when the truth is humiliating. Finally, I said, "No." Elaine closed her eyes. Deborah took the blue-taped key from the ring and placed it on top of the dryer beside the bank notice. "There's a small room behind the office," she said. "It's not a guest room. It used to be storage. There's a cot and a fold-out chair. The bathroom is down the hall. It isn't much." I looked at the key. "Mrs. Lawson." Deborah, we can't pay you." I didn't ask. "I have a watch," I said. "It's old, but no. I don't take charity easily. I don't give it easily." That stopped me. She looked tired again, but not weak. "You can call it whatever helps you sleep. A favor. A room held for maintenance. A bookkeeping error. I don't care, but I'm not sending you and your wife out to stand by that road tomorrow morning." Elaine began to cry then, not loudly. Not the kind of crying that asks to be comforted. Just a quiet breaking, shoulders folding inward. One hand pressed against her mouth. I put my hand on her back. For 44 years I had been the man who found solutions. I fixed the pump when it froze. I negotiated insurance claims. I read the contracts. I made sure there was money in the account before the bill came due. I had believed protection meant preparation, but there we were. Alive only because a motel owner with tired eyes had decided not to become another person who looked away. I picked up the key. It was warm from the dryer. "Thank you," I said. Deborah gave a small nod and turned the washer dial back to its cycle. Elaine wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She reached for the bank notice, but I folded it carefully and slid it into the inside pocket of my shirt. Not the jacket. Not again. As we carried our damp clothes back toward room 12, I stopped in the hallway and looked through the small window at the highway beyond the motel. Cars passed without slowing. Lives continued. People drove to work, to lunch, to appointments, to homes where their keys still fit the locks. Behind me, Elaine held the blue-taped key in her palm like it was something fragile. For the first time since our children left us there, we had a place to sleep beyond Saturday. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like the first documented proof that our old life had been entered, altered, and signed away by hands we had raised ourselves. The room behind the office was not meant for sleeping. Deborah had not lied about that. It was narrow, with a low ceiling, a cot against one wall, a fold-out chair beside a metal filing cabinet, and a small window that looked out at the back of the ice machine. At night, whenever someone came for ice, the machine groaned like an old furnace trying to remember its purpose. Elaine took the cot because I insisted. I took the fold-out chair. It sagged in the middle and pinched my hip if I shifted the wrong way, but I had slept in worse places during railway audits in the middle of winter, when a storm closed the roads and the only available room smelled of diesel and wet wool. Comfort had never been my strongest requirement. Certainty had, and certainty was what I no longer had. The bank notice sat on the metal filing cabinet between us, folded into thirds, its edges soft from being hidden in my jacket lining. Every time the hallway light caught the white paper, I felt it watching me. Whitmore Family Care Trust. Those 4 words had become a locked door. Elaine slept badly. She turned often, pulling the thin motel blanket closer to her chin. Once, around 2 in the morning, she whispered Melissa's name in her sleep. Not angrily, not even sadly, like a mother calling across a backyard. I lay awake and stared at the ceiling tiles. I did not think about revenge. People imagine betrayal makes you want fire. Maybe it does, for some. But for me, the first feeling was not fire. It was inventory. What did we still have? A duffel bag, $12, and change. A motel owner willing to look the other way. One bank notice that proved my retirement payment had been redirected. A phone that still worked, though everyone we needed had stopped answering. My mind, that last item, mattered more than the others. By morning I had arranged the facts in the only way I knew how. Not emotionally. Not because emotion was wrong, but because emotion alone could drown a man before he reached shore. I wrote everything down on the back of an old maintenance form Deborah had given me. Date we arrived. Names of all 3 children present. Room number. Payment period. Phone calls attempted. Cards declined. Bank login failure. Envelope found in jacket lining. Receiving account name. Elaine watched me write while sitting on the cot, both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee Deborah had brought us from the office. "You're making a file," she said. "I'm making a record. Is there a difference?" "A file waits for someone to care," I said. "A record doesn't." She looked down into her coffee. "Russell, I don't know if I want to know everything." I stopped writing. Her voice was small, but not weak. There was a difference. Weakness bends because it has no structure. Elaine had structure. She had endured winters on the farm, lean years, surgeries, layoffs, family funerals, and the long, quiet disappointment of children who called less as soon as they needed less. This was not weakness. This was grief asking for mercy. I set the pen down. "We can stop," I said. She looked up. "Can we?" I did not answer, because we both knew the truth. We could refuse to investigate, but the thing had already happened. Not knowing would not restore our cards. It would not bring the children back to the motel with apologies. It would not put our retirement money where it belonged. Elaine closed her eyes for a moment. Then she reached for the bank notice. "Read it to me again," she said. So I did. Slowly. Not because she could not read it herself, but because sometimes hearing a thing spoken aloud gives it shape. I read the payment amount. I read the effective date. I read the receiving account. When I reached the words Family Care Trust, her jaw trembled, but she did not ask me to stop. Deborah knocked once on the open doorframe a few minutes later. She was carrying a small cardboard box against one hip and had a pencil tucked behind her ear. Her expression told me she had already made a decision and did not intend to ask permission for it. "I made a call," she said. I stood. "To whom?" "A man named Martin Kessler." The name meant nothing to me. Deborah set the box on the filing cabinet. Inside were crackers, 2 apples, a bottle of aspirin, and a travel pack of tissues. She pretended not to see Elaine notice the tissues first. "He used to investigate financial exploitation cases," Deborah continued. "Elder abuse, bad trusteeships, guardianship messes, pension diversions, that kind of thing." Elaine stiffened at the phrase, elder abuse. Deborah noticed and softened her voice without turning it sweet. "He's not a lawyer. Not officially. Not any more tied to any agency. But he knows what paper is supposed to look like." I looked at the notice on the cabinet. "So do I said. "I figured," Deborah replied. "But you're inside it. Sometimes a man standing in the burning house needs someone outside to tell him which wall is still safe." It was a practical sentence. That made it harder to reject. I had always disliked needing help. Not because I thought myself above it, but because help has a cost, even when no money changes hands. It changes how you see yourself. It turns a private failure into a shared fact. Elaine reached across the cot and touched my sleeve. "Russ," she said, "let him look." I heard more than permission in her voice. I heard exhaustion. I heard trust. And beneath both, I heard something I had not heard from her since the envelope appeared. A small wish to stop carrying the weight alone. "All right," I said. Deborah nodded once. "He'll be here after lunch. He charges?" "Usually." "And today?" She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. I had not noticed before that she wore them on a chain around her neck when she wasn't reading. "Today. He's coming for coffee." Martin Kessler arrived at 1:20 the afternoon in an old gray Buick that looked cleaner than the motel office. I watched him through the small back window as he parked beside the dumpster rather than in front of the guest rooms. That told me something. People who wanted attention parked where they could be seen. People who wanted the work parked where it was convenient. He stepped out slowly. Not from age exactly, but from caution. He was a lean man in his early 60s, with close-cropped white hair, a narrow face, and a tan canvas jacket that had seen better years but not better care. He carried a worn leather folio under one arm and walked with a slight limp that became less noticeable the closer he came. As if his body resented the first few steps, but accepted the rest. Deborah met him at the back door. They did not hug. They did not shake hands. He said, "Lawson," she said, "Kessler." That was their greeting. He came into the storage room and looked first at Elaine, then at me, then at the folded bank notice on the filing cabinet. His eyes were pale blue and sharp, but not unkind. He had the tired patience of a man who had spent too many years watching decent people arrive late to their own disasters. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. "Russell." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Elaine," she said, though her voice was guarded. He did not sit, until Deborah brought in a third folding chair. Even then, he lowered himself carefully, placed his folio on his knees, and waited. I appreciated that. Most men who think they know something begin by speaking. Martin began by listening. I told him the facts without decoration. I told him about the trip, the 3 nights, the unanswered calls, the cards, the bank notice. Elaine added small details I had missed. Melissa choosing the duffel bag herself. Grant handing the room key to Elaine instead of me. Owen mentioning a gas station that was closed. Martin wrote almost nothing at first. He only made small marks in the margin of a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he asked, "Do any of your children have access to your mail?" "Melissa picks it up sometimes when we're away," Elaine said. "How often are you away?" I almost laughed. "We run a farm. We're rarely away." Martin made a mark. "Do any of them have power of attorney?" "No," I said. Elaine hesitated. I turned to her. "What?" She looked down. "Grant brought papers last year. He said they were emergency documents, in case one of us had a stroke or a car accident." "Elaine." "I didn't sign anything giving him control," she said quickly. "At least I don't think I did. He said it was just so the hospital could speak to him." I felt my chest tighten. Martin's pen stopped moving. "Do you have copies?" "At home," I said. He looked at me, and in that look I understood the problem. Home was no longer just a place we missed. It was the place where the records were, and the people who had left us here might already be inside it. Elaine read my face. "Russell," she whispered. I stood so quickly, the folding chair scraped the floor. "I need to call the sheriff." Martin raised one hand. Not dismissive. Steady. "You can," he said. "But what will you report right now? Your adult children drove you to a motel and haven't answered calls. Your cards declined. You found a bank notice. It may be enough to start a welfare concern, maybe not enough to stop whatever they're doing. They're in our house. Maybe. They have our papers. Likely. Then why are you telling me to wait?" "I'm not," Martin said. "I'm telling you to aim." The word landed hard. Aim. Not panic. Not charge. Not beg. Aim. He opened his folio and removed a form. "With your permission, I can run a limited trace. Pension deposit destination, trust registration, public filings, any civil petitions tied to your names or property. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just what paper is available if a man knows which drawers to open. How long? A few hours if the systems cooperate. Longer if they don't." I looked at Elaine. Her face was pale, but she nodded. Martin slid the form toward me. "This authorizes me to verify records on your behalf. It does not give me control of anything. It does not let me move money. It does not let me speak for you legally. It only lets me ask questions without every clerk hanging up in my face." I read the form line by line. Then I read it again. Martin waited. Deborah leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, saying nothing. For the first time in days, the room did not feel like a trap. It felt like a small, ugly command center. A quote, a filing cabinet, a motel washer thumping down the hall, a stranger with a legal pad, my wife sitting upright, afraid but no longer pretending. I signed. Elaine signed after me. Martin took the form, placed it in his folio, and stood. "I'll use the office," he said to Deborah. "You remember the password? Your Wi-Fi password has been Pine Lantern 1978 for 6 years. 7, she said. He gave what might have been a smile if it had lived longer. For the next 3 hours, Elaine and I waited. Waiting during ignorance is one kind of pain. Waiting while someone else begins to know the truth is another. The first lets you imagine. The second takes imagination away, piece by piece. Through the open door, I could hear Martin's voice from the office now and then. Yes, I'm calling with written authorization. No, not a beneficiary change. A receiving account change. Spell that again. Date of registration? Who are the listed trustees? At one point, Elaine stood and walked to the doorway, then stopped before stepping into the hall. She looked at me. Do you think all 3 of them knew? I wanted to tell her no. Grant, maybe. Melissa, maybe. Owen, perhaps dragged along. But the motel had taken 3 vehicles to arrange. The duffel had been packed too lightly. The phones had gone silent together. Whatever comfort I could offer her would be fiction. I don't know, I said. She smiled sadly. You keep saying that when you do. I looked away. Near 5 o'clock, Martin returned. He did not bring the yellow legal pad first. He brought a printed sheet and set it on the filing cabinet. That told me he wanted us to see something official. The Whitmore Family Care Trust was registered 3 years ago, he said. Elaine pressed her hand to her stomach. Listed trustees are Grant Whitmore, Melissa Carver, and Owen Whitmore. Carver. Melissa's married name. All 3. No room left for accident. I picked up the paper. The print blurred for a second, and I realized my eyes were wet. Not with the kind of tears that fall, the kind that gather behind the face and turn everything sharp. What does it say the trust is for? I asked. Martin looked at his notes. Financial management, living assistance, medical coordination, property preservation, and elder care support. Deborah made a sound under her breath. Not a word. Something closer to disgust. I kept reading. There was a paragraph near the bottom about protecting vulnerable adults from financial confusion, undue stress, and unsafe decision-making. Vulnerable adults. I had been called many things in my life. Cheap. Stubborn. Hard to please. Too quiet. Too careful. But never that. Elaine reached for the page. I handed it to her. Her eyes moved slowly across the lines. When she reached the trustees' names, her lips parted, as if she had been struck. They put themselves in charge of us, she said. Martin was careful with his reply. On paper, yes. Can they do that? Sometimes families create trusts legitimately. Sometimes parents agree. Sometimes adult children help manage bills. The existence of a trust is not automatically criminal. But we didn't agree, I said. That is where the problem begins. He removed another sheet from his folio. This is what concerns me more. The second page was a summary of recent deposits and categorized withdrawals. Not full account details, not yet, but enough to show a pattern. My pension deposit appeared each month, then transfers out, medical transport, home care consultation, cognitive assessment preparation, property maintenance, care coordination fee. I read the labels. Elaine read my face. We never had medical transport, she said. No. We never had home care. No. What is cognitive assessment preparation? Martin's expression darkened slightly. That is a phrase people use when they are building a case. A case for what? He did not answer immediately. I knew then that he had one more thing. He placed a third page on the cabinet. This one was not financial. It was a document summary. At the top were our names. Mine first. Elaine's beneath it. Under the description line, I read the words slowly. Preliminary capacity concerns regarding asset management. My hand went cold around the paper. Elaine did not understand the phrase at first. I did. It was not a diagnosis. Not yet. It was not a court order. Not yet. It was not a declaration that I was incompetent. But it was the first brick in that wall. Martin spoke quietly. There are periodic reports attached to the trust record. They indicate you have shown signs of confusion regarding finances. Missed payments. Repetitive questioning. Difficulty understanding asset value. Elaine's voice cracked. That isn't true. I know. You don't know us. No, Martin said. But I know reports written to reach a conclusion. I sat down because my legs had become unreliable. For 3 years, while we ate holiday dinners and mailed birthday cards and answered calls about plumbing, car trouble, and business ideas, our children had been building a paper version of us, a weaker version, a confused version, a version that could be managed, moved, overruled. The room behind the office seemed smaller than before. Elaine stood very still, holding the edge of the cot. Her face had gone beyond shock into something quieter. A door inside her had closed. I heard it without sound. When did they file the last report? I asked. Martin looked at the page. 6 days ago. 6 days. Before the motel. Before the sandwiches. Before Grant said fresh air. Before Melissa said comfortable clothes. Before Owen mentioned a closed gas station. 6 days ago, they had written down that I was losing my ability to manage our assets. Then they drove us out of town and left us where we could not easily object. I looked at the bank notice, then at the trust summary, then at my wife. The shame I had been carrying shifted shape. It stopped being shame. It became evidence. Print everything, I said. Martin nodded, as if he had been waiting for that sentence. I already started. Elaine sat beside me. She did not cry this time. She took my hand, but not for comfort, for balance. Deborah stood in the doorway, the blue-taped key hanging from her fingers. She looked at us, then at Martin. How bad? She asked. Martin closed his folio. Bad enough that they didn't just want the money, he said. They wanted the right to say these two didn't know what money was anymore. No one spoke after that. Outside, the pine lantern sign flickered on as dusk moved across the highway. For the first time, I did not see it as a dying sign. I saw it as a warning light. And after 32 years of auditing broken systems, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Warning lights were not there to scare you. They were there to tell you where to begin. Martin Kessler printed the documents in batches. The motel office was not built for an investigation. It was built for room keys, late check-ins, lost towels, and guests complaining about the ice machine. But by sundown that evening, Deborah's little counter had become a sorting table. Martin placed papers into stacks. Pension records, trust summaries, public filings, report indexes, notes with dates written in his careful, slanted hand. The printer groaned like it resented every page. Deborah stood beside it with her arms folded, watching the tray fill. Every few minutes she removed another stack and brought it back to the room behind the office, where Elaine and I sat under the flat white ceiling light. I had spent 32 years looking at paper that people hoped no one would read carefully. Invoices padded with small charges. Maintenance logs rewritten after accidents. Inspection reports signed by men who had never entered the building. Travel claims with dates that did not match weather records. Fraud rarely begins with a grand lie. It begins with the belief that no one will notice the small one. That night I noticed everything. Martin set the first full packet on the filing cabinet. These are the capacity reports attached to the trust file, he said. Copies only. I still need certified versions, but these are enough to start with. Elaine sat on the cot with a blanket around her shoulders, even though the room was warm. She had stopped asking whether the children might have misunderstood something. That bridge had collapsed in Chapter 3 when Martin said all 3 names were listed as trustees. Grant, Melissa, Owen. Now she watched the documents as if they were people sitting across from her. Do I have to read them? She asked. No, I said. She looked at me. Do you? Yes. Martin pulled the folding chair closer but did not sit in it right away. Russell. I'll review them too. You don't have to carry the whole load. I know. He heard what I did not say. I needed to read them myself. Not because I distrusted him. Because somewhere inside those pages, our children had built a false version of me. If I let someone else meet that version first, then I was still being managed, still being spoken for, still standing outside the room while my life was discussed in legal language. So I opened the packet. The first report had a clean header, Preliminary Household Financial Capacity Review. My name appeared beneath it. Elaine's name appeared on the next line. The date was from nearly 3 years earlier. The report was 9 pages long. The tone was polite and professional. That made it worse. Cruelty shouted at you from across a table. Paper cruelty sat upright, used proper margins, and called itself concern. I read the introduction. It claimed I had demonstrated increased difficulty interpreting recurring expenses. It claimed Elaine had expressed confusion regarding household account balances. It claimed our adult children had stepped in temporarily to stabilize financial management. Temporarily. I wrote that word on a separate sheet. Then I turned the page. There was a table of monthly expenses. Utilities. Insurance. Property tax estimate. Medication cost. Transportation. Home. Maintenance. At first glance, nothing jumped out. That is how bad documents survive. They look almost right. I took Deborah's pencil and began marking. The property tax estimate was too high by nearly 11%. Not impossible. Just wrong. The electric bill average was listed at a winter rate across all 12 months. Lazy, but not decisive. The medication cost included a blood pressure prescription I had stopped taking 5 years earlier after my doctor changed it. I underlined that. Elaine leaned forward. What is it? Old information. How old? Too old for someone claiming to evaluate us recently. Martin finally sat down. I kept reading. Page 4 had a behavioral observation section. According to the report, I had repeated the same question about account balances during a family meeting. Elaine had deferred repeatedly to her spouse and appeared uncertain when asked about liquid assets. I remembered the meeting. It had been at our kitchen table on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Grant had brought a folder. Melissa had brought a laptop. Owen had arrived late, smelling of gasoline and chewing mint gum. They had asked about the farm insurance, the savings account, and whether we had considered simplifying things. I had asked one question twice, not because I was confused, because Grant had not answered it the first time. What exactly do you mean by simplifying? He had smiled then, the same flat smile he wore when he dropped us at the motel. The report turned that moment into evidence. I felt my hand tighten around the pencil until the wood pressed into my finger. Elaine noticed. She reached over and gently touched my wrist. Don't let them make you disappear inside their words, she said. I looked at her. That was not the kind of sentence Elaine usually said. She was the woman who softened arguments, found excuses, and filled silence with tea. But something in her had shifted. Not hardened. Clarified. She was not defending the children anymore. She was defending me. I placed the pencil down for a moment. That was the first time since the motel parking lot that I felt anything close to strength. Not victory. Not even hope. Just the quiet steadiness of not being alone inside the accusation. I turned to page 5. That was where the first real mistake appeared. It was a spreadsheet-style table, printed sideways. A simple financial behavior checklist. Dates down the left column. Categories across the top. Balance awareness. Bill payment reliability. Investment comprehension. Property decision readiness. The entries were marked with numbers. 1 through 5. At the bottom, the report calculated a weighted risk score. I stared at that total for a long time. Not because the score was insulting, though it was. Because the arithmetic was wrong. Martin, I said. He looked up. This total doesn't match the weights. He moved his chair closer. I pointed to the columns. They gave property decision readiness a double weight, but the formula only applies it to the first 2 rows. Then the final line rounds down, instead of up. Martin studied the page. That's specific. It's familiar. His eyes shifted from the report to me. I felt something old wake up in my mind. Not memory exactly. Pattern recognition. Do you have a magnifier? I asked. Deborah, standing in the doorway, disappeared and returned with a small magnifying glass from the front desk. People leave these behind, she said. Reading glasses too. Never wedding rings. Funny how that works. I took it and bent over the table. The numbers had a spacing pattern I knew. The decimal points did not align like modern accounting software. The totals had been exported from something older, then pasted into a document template. I could see slight irregularities in the font, tiny shifts where one table had been copied into another file. My pulse slowed. That happens when my mind finds the track. This wasn't generated by a medical evaluator, I said. Martin did not interrupt. I tapped the table. This formatting comes from an old transport accounting program. We used to see it in regional freight offices, mid-2000s, maybe early 2010s. The software had a rounding error in weighted tables when the export was converted to PDF. Deborah blinked. You can tell that from the numbers? I can tell it from the mistake. Elaine looked at the page as if it had changed color. I continued. This report claims to be from 3 years ago. But the software style is much older, and no legitimate capacity evaluator would use a freight accounting export table to assess a person's mental fitness. Martin leaned back. For the first time since he had arrived, I saw something like approval cross his face. Could be a copied template, he said. Could be. Could be someone reused an old spreadsheet because they didn't know what they were doing. Could be. And if we can show that, he said, the report becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable. That was a beautiful word when applied to a lie. I moved to the next report. This one was dated 18 months later. Different title. Same tone. Same careful language. Ongoing family care assessment. The report claimed a licensed physician had reviewed my financial judgment concerns after a telehealth consultation. The physician's name was listed as Dr. Lionel Harbury. I did not recognize the name. Elaine did. Wait, she said. Harbury? You know him? He used to be at the clinic near the pharmacy. Tall man, always wore bow ties. Did we ever see him? No. He retired before the clinic closed. I looked at Martin. He was already writing. When? He asked. Elaine frowned, searching memory. 4 years ago? Maybe 5. Mary Alice from the library brought him a retirement cake. It had little icing bow ties on it. Deborah looked at Martin. That's the kind of thing women remember. I've learned not to argue with that, Martin said. He wrote the name down. I read the signature line. The signature was not a signature at all. It was a printed cursive font made to look handwritten. I had seen that trick before on internal memos when someone wanted speed to masquerade as authorization. Then I turned to the appointment date. The report claimed Elaine and I had participated in a telehealth review on a Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Elaine stood up. No, she said. All 3 of us looked at her. Her face had gone pale, but her voice was firm. No, she repeated. That was the week of the spring book sale. I opened the library at 9 every morning that week because Clara had surgery. Are you sure? Martin asked. Elaine gave him a look that would have silenced a louder man. I kept that book sale running for 15 years. I know the week. She crossed the room, opened our duffel bag, and pulled out a small red pocket calendar. I had not even known she packed it. Elaine had carried those calendars for decades, one per year, held together with rubber bands in a drawer at home. This one had a bent cover and a pencil tucked into the spiral. She flipped through it with quick, certain fingers. There, she said. She handed it to me. On that Tuesday, in her neat handwriting, she had written, book sale setup. 8:30. Clara out. Bring donation labels. Below that, in smaller letters, Rus dentist 11. Nolla. I stared at the page. My dentist appointment. I remembered that too. A cracked molar. I had complained all afternoon because the temporary crown felt too high. Elaine had found our alibi in a red pocket calendar. Not a dramatic discovery, not a secret safe, not a hidden recording, just the kind of small record women keep because life runs on details no one respects until they are needed. I looked at her and felt a wave of love so sudden it nearly hurt. For 3 days I had been thinking like an auditor. Dates, accounts, signatures, access points. But Elaine had been keeping records of life itself. Library shifts, dentist appointments, donation labels, ordinary things. Ordinary things could save you. Martin asked to see the calendar. Elaine handed it over, and he treated it with more respect than some lawyers treat sworn affidavits. "This matters," he said. Elaine sat back down, breathing hard, as if she had lifted something heavy. "You found it," I said. She shook her head, almost embarrassed. "It was just in my bag." "No," I said. "You found it." She looked at me then, and for the first time since we had arrived at Pine Lantern, the corner of her mouth moved upward. Not quite a smile, but near enough to remember what one looked like. We worked until the motel office closed. Report by report, the pattern emerged. Dates that did not match. Medical language repeated across documents as if pasted from one file to another. Service providers with no addresses. Assessment notes that described conversations we never had. One page referred to me as Mr. R. Whitfield, before switching back to Whitmore in the next paragraph. A careless copy and paste mistake. I circled it 3 times. Martin let out a low whistle. "That one is ugly." "It's useful," I said. Deborah brought sandwiches from the diner around 8. She claimed the cook made them wrong and could not sell them. None of us believed her. We ate them anyway. Elaine saved half of hers for later. That small act nearly broke me. A woman who had spent 44 years making sure everyone else had second helpings was now saving half a sandwich in a motel storage room because she did not know when she would eat again. I wanted anger then. I wanted it badly, but anger would have scattered me. So I stayed with the paper. Near 9:30, Martin organized the marked reports into a clean stack. "You realize what this suggests," he said, "that the reports were manufactured." "Careful," he replied. "We can say inconsistent. We can say unreliable. We can say questionable origin. Manufactured is for later, when we can prove who touched what." I nodded. Old habits. Strong words feel satisfying. Precise words win rooms. "Questionable origin," I said. Martin looked pleased. Deborah leaned against the filing cabinet. "So what happens now?" I looked at the stack of reports, then at Elaine's red calendar beside them, then at the bank notice in my shirt pocket. For the first time, the evidence did not feel like something being done to us. It felt like something we were gathering. "We keep going," I said. Elaine picked up her calendar and placed it on top of the reports, not beside them. On top. It was a quiet gesture, but I understood it. Her life belonged in the record too. Not just the version written by our children. Not just the version filed under concern and care and risk. The real version. The one with book sales, dentist appointments, donation labels. A woman who knew exactly where she had been on the day someone claimed she was confused. Martin tapped the stack into alignment against the edge of the filing cabinet. "I'll make copies of everything you marked," he said. "Tomorrow I can request verification on the physician's license status and the service providers." Tomorrow. The word no longer frightened me the way it had the day before. Outside, the Pine Lantern sign buzzed in the dark. The P still blinked. The orange light still looked tired. The highway still carried people past us without stopping. But inside that storage room, the lie had developed hairline cracks. Small ones, precisiones. The kind people miss until pressure finds them. I had spent my career inspecting systems after men swore nothing was wrong. I knew what a crack meant. It meant the structure was still standing, but it also meant it had begun to confess. By morning, the storage room behind the Pine Lantern office had begun to look less like a place we were hiding and more like a place where something was being rebuilt. Not rebuilt beautifully. There was nothing beautiful about paper stacks on a metal filing cabinet, a cot with a folded motel blanket, a red pocket calendar beside a bank notice, and a coffee maker on a cardboard box because the nearest outlet was already full. But there was order. That mattered to me. Martin arrived before breakfast with a folder under his arm and a paper bag from the diner. He handed Elaine a biscuit wrapped in foil without making a speech about it. She accepted it with both hands, the way people accept kindness when they are trying not to become dependent on it. Deborah came in behind him carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Printer's got half a toner cartridge left," she said. "After that, this investigation starts costing me more than my last divorce." Martin glanced at her. "You never married." "Exactly," she said. That's how expensive toner is. Elaine actually smiled. It was small and brief, but it changed the air in the room. For a moment, we were not abandoned parents, sitting in a motel storage space with our financial lives scattered in front of us. We were four adults in an uncomfortable room trying to get through a hard morning. Martin set his folder down. "I verified Dr. Harbury," he said. Elaine's smile disappeared. "He retired 4 years and 7 months ago," Martin continued. "His license is inactive. He could not have conducted the telehealth review listed in the report." I nodded once. Not because I was calm, because nodding was safer than letting my hands move. "And the service providers?" I asked. "One disconnected phone number. One mailbox rental in Springfield. One company dissolved 2 years before the first invoice." Deborah muttered something under her breath that I chose not to repeat. Martin opened the folder. "But that's not why I came early. There are sentences that tighten a room before the facts arrive." That was one of them. Elaine put down her biscuit. Martin removed a printed page and turned it toward me. "I found a civil calendar entry tied to the trust." I read the heading. It was from the county probate division back home. The matter was scheduled for the following week. The language was dry, but I understood it before I reached the end. A petition had been filed to expand trustee authority over real property belonging to Russell A. Whitmore and Elaine M. Whitmore on grounds of financial vulnerability and ongoing capacity concerns. Real property. Our farm. I read the line again, even though I did not need to. Our farm was no longer only a place where Elaine had planted ferns and where I had replaced fence posts and where the back porch step complained in winter. On that paper, it had become real property, something to be governed, something to be controlled, something to be moved from one column to another. Elaine's voice came from very far away. "What does that mean?" Martin leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. "It means they are asking the court to give the trustees broader authority. If approved, they may be able to make decisions involving the farm without your active consent." Elaine looked at me. I could see her trying to place that sentence inside a life she recognized. "You mean sell it," she said. Martin did not soften it. "Possibly. No," she whispered. "They wouldn't." No one corrected her. We had learned by then that grief often speaks in habits. Her mouth said they wouldn't because it had spent a lifetime protecting the idea of them. But her hands had already begun to tremble because some deeper place knew they had. I stood and walked to the small window. Outside, the back lot of the motel was all gravel, weeds, and delivery boxes. Beyond that, the highway carried strangers past us at 60 miles an hour. None of them knew that 2 old people in a storage room were watching their home become an exhibit in someone else's case. Martin said, "There's more." Of course there was. There is always more after a paper calls your home real property. He laid out a second sheet. This one was not from the court. It was a business filing from the Missouri Secretary of State. Silver Bend Landing Development Group, LLC. I did not recognize the name. Elaine did not either. But 3 names appeared under managing members. Grant Whitmore, Melissa Carver, Owen Whitmore. The room was silent except for the old refrigerator humming in the corner. "What is it?" Elaine asked. Martin answered without drama. "A development company." "Development of what?" "A lakefront retirement retreat. Cabins, marina slips, restaurant, wellness center. At least, that's how they describe it." Deborah took the paper before I could. She read the first page, then the second, her eyebrows drawing together. "Silver Bend," she said. "I've seen that sign." Martin looked up. "Where?" "County road toward the lake. Big painted board near the turnoff. Shows happy gray-haired people sitting on a dock like retirement is just lemonade and matching sweaters." "That's the one." Elaine stared at the filing. "Our children own that?" "They are part owners," Martin said. "I'm still tracing the structure. There are other members. And what does that have to do with us?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a third document, a financing notice. I knew the shape of it before I read the content. Loans have a language. So do failing loans. This one had the tight, impatient tone of a lender who had stopped believing promises. Silver Bend Landing had missed development milestones. It had exceeded its initial construction budget. It had a pending demand for additional collateral. Collateral. There it was. The word that turned the lights on. I looked at Martin. Our farm, I said. He nodded. Elaine's face drained of color. No, she said again, but softer this time. Not denial. Mourning. I sat down beside her. For a long moment no one spoke. Not because we had nothing to say, but because the truth had finally become simple enough to hurt cleanly. The motel had not been the plan. It had been a tool. The trust had not been care. It had been a mechanism. The capacity reports had not been concern. They had been construction. All of it pointed toward the same end. Remove our voices, gain control of the farm, use it to rescue a business that had begun sinking before we ever knew we were standing on its deck. I thought back over the past 2 years. Grant sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop open, showing us projected property values. Dad, land is only useful if it's working for you. Melissa sending articles about older adults being isolated in rural homes. Mom, I'm not saying you can't manage. I'm saying why keep making life harder? Owen walking along the fence line, kicking at a rotted post. This place is more liability than legacy. At the time, I had heard impatience. Now I heard rehearsal. Each sentence had been part of a script they were writing around us. Elaine touched the business filing with the tip of one finger. They never told us. No, I said. Not once. No. Grant came for Thanksgiving last year and carved the turkey at our table. He sat in your chair after dinner and talked about how pretty the sunset looked over the west field. I remembered. He had stood at the window too long. I had thought he was appreciating the view. Maybe he had been estimating frontage. Elaine folded her hands in her lap. She was not crying. That worried me more than tears. I kept thinking, she said slowly, that if they were doing something wrong, it was because they were scared. Scared we were getting older. Scared we would fall. Scared the farm would become too much. She looked at the Silver Bend papers. But they weren't afraid for us. Her voice changed on the last 2 words. For us. The grief in them was almost too much to hear. I wanted to say something comforting. I wanted to tell her there were still parts of our children untouched by greed. That maybe Grant had started with concern. Maybe Melissa had convinced herself this was practical. Maybe Owen had gone along because he was weak rather than cruel. But comfort built on guesses is another kind of dishonesty. So I said nothing. Martin gave us time. He did not interrupt the silence. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. He understood that facts do not land all at once. They enter a person slowly, like cold water through a seam. After a while, he tapped the financing notice. There is a hearing next Thursday, he said. If you don't appear, or if the court accepts the reports as valid, the trustees may gain temporary authority to act on your behalf regarding the property. Temporary, Deborah said bitterly. That word again. Martin nodded. Temporary authority often becomes enough authority when someone is in a hurry. And they are in a hurry, I said. Yes, because the bank wants collateral. Yes, and the farm is the only thing large enough. Likely. Elaine stood. The movement startled me. She walked to the door, then stopped with one hand on the frame. I need air, she said. I started to rise. She shook her head. No. Just for a minute. Deborah followed anyway, but not too close. Through the small window, I watched Elaine step into the back lot. She stood near the dumpster, of all places, facing the strip of trees beyond the motel. Her blue cardigan lifted in the wind. Deborah remained several steps behind her, arms folded, giving her privacy without leaving her alone. That was a skill. I stayed inside with Martin. She's stronger than I am, I said. Most women are, he replied. I almost smiled. You say that like a man who learned it the hard way. There is no other way to learn it. He gathered the documents into separate stacks. Russell, I need to ask something plainly. Go ahead. If this comes to a fight, are you trying to save the farm because you want to live there, or because you don't want them to take it? The question irritated me. Then it frightened me, because I did not know the answer. For 41 years, The farm had been the fixed point on the map of my life. But when I pictured it now, I no longer saw Elaine's ferns first. I saw Grant's laptop, Melissa's printed articles, Owen's boots near the fence. I saw the oak desk in my den, perhaps already opened. I saw our kitchen table turned into a planning surface for people who called us vulnerable adults. I don't know, I said. Martin accepted that. That matters, he said. Courts understand property. They don't always understand home. But you need to know what you're asking for before someone else defines it. Quote, I looked at the business filing. What I want, I said, is for them to stop using our age as a tool. That's clear. I want our money back under our names. Also clear, and I want the court to know we were not confused. We were removed. Martin wrote that down, not because he needed to remember it, because it was the kind of sentence that belonged in a record. Outside, Elaine turned back toward the building. Deborah spoke to her softly. Elaine nodded, then wiped her face once with both hands. When she came in, there was gravel dust on the hem of her slacks. She looked at me first, then at Martin. I want to see the project, she said. Martin's eyebrows rose slightly. Silver Bend? Yes. Elaine, I said, we don't have to. I want to see what our children thought was worth more than us. No one argued. Deborah drove us. Her old pickup smelled faintly of motor oil, peppermint gum, and motel laundry. Martin sat in front with her. Elaine and I sat in the back seat, close together, the folder of Silver Bend documents on my lap. The road toward the lake curved through pine and scrub oak, past bait shops, shuttered cabins, and hand-painted signs advertising firewood. After 15 minutes, we saw the billboard. Deborah had described it perfectly. A painted lake under a pink sunset. Two silver-haired couples laughing on a dock with wine glasses in their hands. In the corner, a slogan, Silver Bend Landing, where your best years begin. Elaine read it aloud. Then she laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. It was sharp, wounded, almost unfamiliar. My best years, she said. The entrance was blocked by a chain-link gate. Beyond it, the development sat half-born and already tired. A gravel road cut through cleared land. Several cabin frames stood without siding. Plastic wrap flapped from exposed lumber. A foundation had collected rainwater. Near the lake, a wooden sign promised a future marina. But the shoreline held only mud, weeds, and two abandoned orange cones. No workers. No machinery running. No sound except wind moving through unfinished walls. Deborah parked near the gate but left the engine running. Elaine leaned forward between the seats. This is it? Martin said nothing. She looked at the empty frames, the puddles, the billboard behind us with its painted happiness. They traded us for this? Her voice did not break this time. That made it worse. I looked at the construction site and felt my anger finally arrive, but not like fire. Like frost. Slow, white, covering everything. Grant had not wanted to protect us. Melissa had not wanted to simplify our lives. Owen had not wanted to spare us from a hard property. They had wanted collateral for a dream too poorly built to stand on its own. I reached into the folder and took out the court calendar entry again. The hearing date stared back at me. Next Thursday. Not far away. Not theoretical. A date gives betrayal a schedule. Elaine rested her hand on my knee. Russell, she said. I turned to her. Her eyes were wet, but steady. We go. To the hearing? Yes. I looked at Martin. He gave no instruction, only waited. Elaine continued. If they want to tell a judge we don't know what our life is worth, then they can do it while we're sitting there. That was the moment I understood something had changed in her. The motel had frightened her. The bank notice had wounded her. The trust had humiliated her. But this unfinished field, this failed promise painted as paradise, had done something else. It had insulted her sense of reality. Elaine had spent years shelving books in proper order, helping people find what they needed, remembering names, dates, donations, appointments. She could forgive weakness. She could forgive fear. She could even forgive neglect if given enough time and proof of regret. But she could not forgive a lie, arranged neatly and sold as care. I folded the court notice and placed it back in the folder. "We go," I said. Deborah put the truck in reverse. As we pulled away, the billboard slipped past the window. "Where your best years begin." I looked at the painted old couples smiling over a fake lake, and then at the real woman beside me, tired and betrayed and still sitting upright. Our best years would not begin there, not behind a locked gate, not in a development built on stolen dignity. Whatever came next, I knew one thing with the clean certainty I used to feel when a ledger finally balanced. They had stopped treating the farm like our home, so now we would stop treating their betrayal like a family misunderstanding. We did not return to the farm before the hearing. That was Elaine's decision. At first, I thought it was fear. I thought she could not bear the idea of seeing the porch, the kitchen window, the west field, the mailbox with our name still painted on the side. But on the morning of the hearing, as she stood in the motel storage room buttoning the sleeves of her pale gray blouse, I understood it was not fear. It was discipline. "If I see the house first," she said, "I might start remembering them as children." She did not say more. She did not need to. Deborah had ironed my old Navy suit the night before. I had worn it to funerals, weddings, and once to a railway board review where 3 executives pretended a safety failure was a budgeting issue. The shoulders were a little tight now. The fabric shined faintly at the elbows. But it was clean, pressed, and mine. Elaine wore the small silver brooch she used to pin to her library cardigan during holiday events. It was shaped like an open book. I had bought it for her 30 years earlier from a craft fair booth run by a woman who made jewelry out of old spoons. Elaine had kept it all this time. When she pinned it near her collar, her fingers trembled only once. Martin arrived with 2 document boxes and a folder tied shut with a red elastic band. He wore a dark jacket, plain tie, and polished shoes that looked as if they spent most of their lives in a closet. Deborah came out from the office holding a set of truck keys and a travel mug. "You two ready?" she asked. "No one ever really is." But we went. The county courthouse sat 3 blocks from the square, a pale stone building with wide steps and a flag snapping hard in the morning wind. I had spent enough of my working life in government buildings to know their smell before we even entered. Floor wax, paper, old heat, and the faint nervousness of people waiting for decisions they could not control. Inside, the hallway outside the probate division was already crowded. Men in suits whispered near vending machines. A woman cried quietly into a tissue, while a lawyer with a leather briefcase checked his watch. An older man in a wheelchair stared at the ceiling tiles as if counting them helped him remain patient. Then I saw our children. Grant stood near the courtroom doors, phone in hand, jaw tight, pretending to read something important. Melissa was beside him, dressed in a cream blazer, her hair pinned back with the kind of care that suggested she had prepared for photographs, not consequences. Owen leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, one boot tapping against the tile. They looked up almost together. For 1 second, all 3 of them had the same face. Not guilt, alarm. They had expected empty chairs. That was the first quiet victory of the day. Grant recovered first. He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked toward us with a smile too clean to be real. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice. "Mom, thank God, we were worried." Elaine stood beside me without moving. "Were you?" she asked. The question was soft enough that someone passing by might have mistaken it for politeness. Grant blinked. Melissa stepped in. "Mom, this isn't the place. We can talk after." "You look tired." "I am tired," Elaine said, but not confused. That stopped her. Owen looked past us at Martin and Deborah. "Who are they?" "Witnesses," I said. Martin said nothing. Deborah lifted her chin just enough to let Owen know she had no interest in being intimidated by a man who could not look his own mother in the eye. A clerk opened the courtroom door and called the calendar. The room was smaller than I expected. No grand jury box, no dramatic oak rail polished by a century of justice. Just rows of benches, a table for petitioners, another for respondents, a court reporter, and a judge's bench raised high enough to remind everyone where the final voice would come from. Judge Marjorie Bell entered at 9 sharp. She was a compact woman with short gray hair, rimless glasses, and the calm expression of someone who had spent years listening to families call greed concern. She did not look severe. That made her more intimidating. Severe people show you where the wall is. Calm people make you discover it yourself. We stood. Then we sat. The case was called by its proper name. In the matter of the Whitmore Family Care Trust, petition to expand trustee authority. Hearing our life reduced to a matter made my stomach tighten. Grant, Melissa, and Owen sat with their attorney, a smooth-faced man named Daniel Price, who looked barely older than our youngest, and carried himself like he had never personally apologized for anything. He began with a practiced tone. Your Honor, this petition is not hostile. It is protective. The trustees are the adult children of Russell and Elaine Whitmore, and they have acted out of necessity as their parents have shown increasing difficulty managing household finances, medical needs, and real property decisions. Protective, necessity, difficulty. Words polished until the fingerprints were gone. Price continued. He mentioned the farm. He mentioned deferred maintenance. He mentioned risk, age, rural isolation, and the emotional burden of property management. He referred to the trust as a family-led support structure created to preserve dignity. Elaine's hand found mine under the table. I expected it to be cold. It was not. It was steady. Then Price presented the reports. The same reports we had marked in pencil at Deborah's motel. The same reports where my old prescription had been listed, where a retired doctor had supposedly reviewed us, where a telehealth appointment had been scheduled on a day Elaine was running a book sale, and I was at the dentist. The judge listened without expression. Grant looked at her often, trying to read her face. Melissa stared at the table. Owen kept tapping his boot until Judge Bell looked over her glasses and said, Mr. Whitmore, please stop. He stopped. When their attorney finished, Judge Bell turned toward us. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I understand you are not represented by counsel today. Martin leaned forward slightly. Your Honor, I am not counsel. I am present as a financial investigator assisting them with document organization. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore speak for themselves. Judge Bell looked at me. Mr. Whitmore? I stood. For a moment, the room tilted. In that strange way, rooms do when your life is about to be judged by strangers. I saw Grant, as a boy, with grass-stained knees. Melissa asleep on the sofa with a library book on her chest. Owen holding a wrench backward while I taught him how to tighten a loose hinge. Then I saw room 12, the motel key, the folded bank notice, the unfinished cabins behind the chain-link gate. The past did not vanish. It simply stepped aside. Your Honor, I said. My name is Russell Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I worked 32 years as an internal auditor for the Federal Railway System. My wife and I did not create this trust. We did not understand that our retirement deposits were being routed through it. We did not consent to reports describing us as financially impaired. And last week, our children drove us to a highway motel, paid for exactly 3 nights, and left us there without transportation or access to our accounts. A sound moved through the room. Not loud, just a shifting of bodies. Judge Bell looked toward the children's table. Mr. Price? Price stood. Your Honor, that characterization is highly emotional and incomplete. The motel stay was intended as temporary respite while the family assessed. Sit down, Judge Bell said. He sat. She looked back at me. Proceed, Mr. Whitmore. Keep to what you can show me. That was all I needed. I was not there to perform pain. I was there to prove pattern. Martin brought the first stack forward. I placed the reports on the table one by one. Not dramatically. Not with accusation in my voice. I explained them as I would have explained a failed audit. This report lists a physician who had retired before the alleged review. I placed the license verification beside it. This table uses an outdated accounting format and contains a weighted total that does not match its own formula. I placed my handwritten calculation beside it. This report describes a telehealth appointment on a Tuesday morning. My wife's pocket calendar shows she was opening the library book sale at 8:30. I had a dental appointment at 11. We were not at home for a telehealth review. Elaine placed her red calendar on the table. Her hand lingered there a second before she let go. That little calendar looked almost absurd in the courtroom. Small, worn, domestic. But Judge Bell leaned forward as if it mattered more than the thick packet of polished concern their attorney had submitted. "May I see that?" she asked. The bailiff carried it to the bench. Judge Bell turned the pages carefully. Melissa closed her eyes. That was when I knew she remembered the calendar too. For years, Elaine had kept the whole family's small history in those pocket calendars. Birthdays, appointments, oil changes, church potlucks, library shifts. The kind of details our children ignored until ignoring them became dangerous. Judge Bell looked up. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this your handwriting?" Elaine stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you maintain these calendars regularly?" "I have since 1982. The judge's face did not change, but I saw her pen move. Price objected. He said the calendar was informal, unauthenticated, not dispositive. Judge Bell let him speak for exactly 8 seconds. "Mr. Price," she said, "your client submitted informal family observations as evidence of diminished capacity. Do not complain when family records answer them." He sat down again. For the first time that morning, Grant's confidence slipped. After that, the rhythm changed. Martin testified as to what he had verified. The trust registration, the trustees, the pension routing, the inactive service providers, the business filing for Silver Bend Landing, and the financing notice requiring additional collateral. He did not call anyone a thief. He did not accuse anyone of fraud. He did something more effective. He placed timelines next to each other. When the trust received pension deposits, when the reports were filed, when the Silver Bend development missed milestones, when the financing notice demanded collateral, when the petition was filed to expand authority over our farm, dates make poor liars. They stand in a line and refuse to look away. Grant's attorney tried to separate the issues. "The development venture is irrelevant to the care needs of the Whitmores," Martin answered. "Then it is an unfortunate coincidence that trust withdrawals increased during the same months the development required capital, and the petition to control real property followed the lender's collateral demand." Judge Bell wrote that down too. Then she asked Elaine if she wished to speak. Elaine rose slowly. I wanted to stand with her, but she shook her head once. She would not be carried through this. She approached the small lectern. The silver book brooch caught the overhead light. "I worked in a library for 26 years, she said. "I helped people find things they thought they had lost. Tax forms, obituaries, old maps, family names. Sometimes people came in angry because they could not find what they wanted. My job was to stay calm and keep looking." She glanced at our children. "I have been doing that with my family for a long time." The courtroom was very still. I kept looking for the good explanation. I told myself my children were busy, worried, overwhelmed. I told myself the motel was a mistake. The bank notice was a misunderstanding. The trust was maybe something they meant to tell us about later. Her voice tightened, but did not break. "But I am done looking for explanations that require me to disappear." Melissa began to cry then, quietly. Elaine did not look away from the judge. "I do not need my children to make me rich. I do not need them to make my life impressive. I only need them not to turn our old age into their opportunity." She paused. Then she said the sentence that ended the room. "I do not need them to protect me from my husband. I need this court to protect us from being erased by our own children." No one moved. Not Grant. Not Melissa. Not Owen. Not even Daniel Price, who finally seemed to understand that legal polish has limits when placed beside plain truth. Judge Bell removed her glasses. She looked tired suddenly, but not uncertain. "I am prepared to issue a temporary order," she said. My heart did not leap. It braced. "The Whitmore Family Care Trust is hereby suspended pending further review. All accounts connected to the trust are to be frozen, except for court-approved essential expenses. The petition to expand trustee authority over real property is denied without prejudice. Control of personal financial decisions and property decisions remains with Russell and Elaine Whitmore. I am also referring the matter for civil review regarding disputed transfers, report irregularities, and possible misuse of funds." Grant stood halfway. "Your Honor, this will destroy." "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore." He sat. Judge Bell looked at all three of them. Your parents appeared today with more documentation, clarity, and composure than the petitioners who asked me to question their capacity. No one spoke. The gavel did not slam. There was no dramatic sound. Only a clerk stamping papers. A judge signing an order. A trust frozen. A farm held in place. A room full of people learning that quiet people are not the same as weak people. When the hearing ended, our children did not come to us right away. Grant argued with Price in a whisper. Owen walked into the hallway and punched something that sounded like a vending machine. Melissa stood alone near the table, tears on her face, looking at Elaine as if she wanted permission to be a daughter again. Elaine did not give it. Not then. She picked up her red calendar from the table, smoothed the bent cover, and placed it back in her purse. I gathered the papers with Martin. Deborah waited by the door, arms folded, her eyes brighter than usual. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt different. Not welcoming, not safe, but no longer airless. I turned to Martin. What happens now? Now, he said. They find out how expensive temporary authority can become when it was built on bad paper. Elaine stood beside me, looking toward the courthouse exit. Through the glass doors, I could see the pale morning light on the steps. For the first time since Pine Lantern, the world outside did not look like a place that had left us behind. It looked like a place we could walk into. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Not because our children had apologized. They hadn't. But because a judge had looked at the paper version of us and the real version of us, and for one quiet morning in a small county courthouse, the real one had been allowed to speak. Elaine slipped her hand into mine. Russell, she said. Yes? I don't want to go home today. I understood. The farm was safe for now, but safe was not the same as whole. We won't, I said. We walked down the courthouse steps together. Not victorious, not healed, not even relieved in the easy way people imagine relief. We were simply standing upright. And after what they had tried to write about us, upright was enough. We did not go home that day. For most of the drive back from the courthouse, Elaine sat beside me in Deborah's pickup, with her hands folded around the strap of her purse. The red pocket calendar was inside that purse now, returned to the same place where she had carried grocery lists, library notes, appointment cards, and ordinary proof of an ordinary life. Martin sat in the front passenger seat with the document boxes at his feet. Deborah drove without turning on the radio. None of us spoke much. There are silences that feel empty. That one did not. It was full of papers stamped by a judge, full of things we had not said to our children in the hallway, full of the strange weight that comes when you win a little piece of your life back and realize you still have to decide what to do with it. The farm was safe for the moment. That was what the temporary order meant. The trust was suspended. The accounts were frozen. The petition to control the property had been denied. Grant, Melissa, and Owen could no longer move our lives around like figures on a spreadsheet. But the judge had not given us back Thanksgiving dinners. She had not restored trust. She had not made our kitchen table clean of all the conversations that must have happened there when we were not listening closely enough. A court can stop a hand from taking. It cannot make that hand gentle again. When we reached Pine Lantern, Deborah pulled around to the back instead of the front. The motel sign flickered in the afternoon light, looking almost embarrassed to still be on. Elaine stepped down from the truck carefully, as if her body had aged several years in one morning. I reached for her elbow. She let me help her. That was new. For most of our marriage, Elaine accepted help only after she had already done most of the work herself. She could carry a laundry basket against her hip, open a door with 2 fingers, remind me where I left my glasses, and still answer the phone before the 3rd ring. But that afternoon she let my hand stay under her arm until we reached the storage room door. Inside, the cot was still against the wall. The folding chair still sagged in the middle. The coffee maker still sat on the cardboard box. The stacks of paper looked smaller now, not because there were fewer of them, but because their power over us had changed. Elaine looked around. This little room kept us alive, she said. Deborah, standing behind us, cleared her throat. Don't go putting that in a review. People will start expecting miracles with their weekly rate. Elaine smiled. Then she stepped forward and hugged her. Deborah froze at first. Not stiff with dislike, just unprepared. Then she put one arm around Elaine's back and held her there with a kind of careful awkwardness that said she had not been hugged properly in a long time. I looked away. Some moments are not private because they happen behind closed doors. They are private because they are too honest to stare at. Martin left after making 2 more calls from the office. Before he went, he stood by his Buick with one hand on the open door. "There will be follow-up," he said. "Civil review, account tracing, likely repayment demands. The court may appoint a neutral fiduciary for a while, just to stabilize things." "Will they go to jail?" Elaine asked. The question surprised all of us. Maybe her most of all. Martin looked toward the highway before answering. "Maybe not. Depends what the review finds and how aggressive the authorities want to be. Bad paperwork and bad faith do not always turn into handcuffs. But they will not walk away clean." And, Elaine nodded slowly. I knew what she was asking beneath the words. She was not hungry to see her children in jail. She was trying to understand the size of the wound. Whether it had a legal name, whether the world outside her chest agreed that something wrong had been done. Martin seemed to understand that too. "They hurt you," he said plainly. The court saw that. Elaine's eyes filled, but she did not cry. "Thank you," she said. He gave a small nod. Then he looked at me. "Do you know what you want to do with the farm?" There it was again. The question that had followed me since Silver Bend. I looked at Elaine. She looked back. Not asking me to decide for her, not waiting for me to carry the answer. After 44 years, we had learned that marriage is not 2 people always wanting the same thing. It is 2 people standing close enough to hear the truth before it hardens into resentment. "I don't think we can live there anymore," she said. My chest tightened, not because I disagreed, because she had said it first. The farm had been the map of our adult life. The kitchen where Elaine burned her first Thanksgiving rolls and cried until my mother ate 3 of them out of loyalty. The backfield where Grant once fell asleep in the hay after refusing to come inside. The porch where Melissa learned to braid her mother's hair. The barn where Owen painted his name on a beam when he was 17 and thought we never saw it. But lately, every memory had acquired a second shadow. Grant measuring land with his eyes. Melissa choosing words like safety and burden. Owen calling legacy a liability. I had thought losing the farm meant losing proof that our life had mattered. Now I wondered whether keeping it would mean letting their betrayal keep speaking from every room. "No," I said. "I don't think we can." Elaine closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them, something in her face had loosened. 3 months passed before the sale was final. Not a forced sale. Not the one Grant wanted. Not a rushed transaction to rescue a failing development behind a locked gate. Handled by a lawyer Judge Bell recommended from a list of court-approved elder law attorneys. The attorney, Marion Voss, was a square-shouldered woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair and a habit of removing her glasses whenever someone tried to rush her. She spoke in short sentences and charged by the hour, but she never made us feel small for asking a question twice. "The farm is yours," she told us at our first meeting. That means selling it can be an act of control, not surrender. I wrote that down. Elaine did not need to. She remembered it. The civil review moved slowly, as truthful things often do. Some money was recovered. Not all. The trust account had been raided through management fees, false service invoices, and transfers disguised as reimbursements. Grant had borrowed against expectations. Melissa had prepared documents she should never have touched. Owen had signed what he claimed he had not fully read. Their attorney called it a misunderstanding of family authority. Marion called it conversion. Martin called it what people call theft when they still want to be invited to Christmas. The court froze what remained and ordered partial repayment schedules while the review continued. Silver Bend Landing collapsed without our farm as collateral. The lender pulled back. The billboard stayed up for a few weeks after the site went quiet. Those painted old couples still laughing over a lake that never got its marina. Deborah sent us a photo of it the day someone finally painted over the slogan. She wrote beneath it, "Best years postponed." Elaine laughed so hard she had to sit down. That was the first deep laugh I had heard from her since before Pine Lantern. We looked at several places after that. A condo near town. Too many hallways. A small house in a subdivision. Too many windows facing other windows. An apartment above a pharmacy. Too many stairs and the smell of cough syrup drifting up from below. Then Marion showed us a listing near Lake Ozarks. Small, she warned. Good, Elaine said. It was a cottage with blue-gray siding, white trim, and a narrow porch facing the water through a line of oak trees. The kitchen was barely large enough for two people to argue in. The second bedroom had built-in shelves crooked enough to make a carpenter sigh. The bathroom needed new tile. The porch boards complained in a different voice than the farms had. But the light was clean. That was what Elaine said first. The light is clean here. I did not know exactly what she meant, but I felt it. There were no old arguments in the corners. No children's measurements on pantry doors. No family meetings hidden inside the grain of the table. Just a quiet room, a view of the water, and a front door that opened because our key turned in the lock. We bought it with money recovered from our own accounts and the lawful proceeds from the farm sale. Not charity, not rescue, not a child's permission. Our money, our names, our decision. The first night in the cottage, we slept on a mattress on the floor because the furniture had not arrived. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The lake was a dark shape beyond the porch rail. Elaine lay beside me, awake. "Russell," she whispered. "Yes. Do you miss it?" I knew what she meant. I thought of the farm, the red pump house, the barn beam with Owen's name, the Westfield at sunset. Then I thought of court papers calling it real property. I thought of trust withdrawals. I thought of the motel key with blue tape. "Yes," I said, "but not enough to go back." She reached for my hand beneath the blanket. Me too. In the months that followed, life became smaller. I do not mean poorer. I mean smaller in the way a room becomes warmer when you stop trying to heat the whole world. Elaine arranged her books in the second bedroom. Not alphabetically at first, which surprised me. She made a shelf for books that comforted her, a shelf for books that made her think, and a shelf for books she said she was not ready to forgive but might someday reread. I built a narrow table for the porch from reclaimed oak. My hands were slower than they used to be, but they remembered. Wood has more mercy than people. If you misjudge it, it does not pretend you are losing your mind. It simply shows you where the grain runs. Deborah visited on Saturdays when the motel was quiet enough for her assistant to manage. She always arrived with something unnecessary. A bag of peaches, a jar of pickles, a stack of towels she claimed were too good for guests who steal shampoo. She sat with Elaine on the porch and talked about nothing urgent. Martin came every few weeks with a fishing rod and a cooler of soda water. He and I rarely caught much. That was not why he came. We sat near the dock, two old men watching a line disappear into water, enjoying a kind of silence that did not demand explanation. News of our children reached us in pieces. Grant sold his house to cover debts tied to Silver Bend. He took a consulting job 2 counties over and, according to Martin, had stopped using phrases like asset optimization in public. Melissa lost her position with the Legal Services Office after the document irregularities became part of the civil review. She wrote Elaine 2 letters. The first one explained too much. The second one said only, "I am sorry I made your love into paperwork." Elaine kept that one. Owen left town before the final repayment terms were entered. He eventually came back, took work repairing equipment for a farm supply company, and mailed us checks in uneven amounts. $50, $75, $30. Each one arrived with no note. I cashed them, not because we needed the money, because repayment is not only arithmetic. Then, one autumn afternoon, almost a year after the motel, a letter came from Grant. The envelope was plain. His handwriting looked older than I remembered. Elaine placed it on the kitchen table and looked at it for most of the afternoon before opening it. I did not rush her. When she finally read it, she did not cry. She passed it to me. It was short. Dad and Mom. I looked at the farm like it was value, waiting to be unlocked. I looked at you, like obstacles standing in the way of that value. I do not know when I became the kind of man who could do that. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am writing because I understand now that what I called planning was betrayal. Grant, I read it twice. Then I folded it along the crease and handed it back to Elaine. "What do you want to do with it?" I asked. She stood, walked to the small desk by the window, and opened the top drawer. Inside were her red pocket calendars, tied with a new ribbon. She placed Grant's letter on top of them and closed the drawer. "Not forgive," she said. "Not yet." "No," she said, "but not carry it around the room either." That evening we sat on the porch as the sun lowered itself behind the trees. The lake caught the color and held it in broken pieces. Somewhere across the water, a man started an old outboard motor, then gave up after 3 coughs. A heron stood near the reeds like a judge who had already heard enough. Elaine sat beside me with a quilt over her knees. "Do you regret selling the farm?" she asked. I had expected the question eventually. I watched the water for a long time. "No," I said. "I regret that it took me so long to understand what a home is." She turned toward me. I continued. "I thought home was the place you kept. The land, the porch, the walls. I thought if I protected the place, I was protecting us." The lake moved quietly. "But home is not a place you have to defend from the people who should be welcome there. Home is where no one turns your name into a signature they can use." Elaine looked away toward the trees. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she reached for my hand. Her hand was thinner than it used to be. Mine was rougher. Between us lay years of work, mistakes, loyalty, exhaustion, children, betrayal, paperwork, motel rooms, courtrooms, and one small cottage bought with money that had finally found its way back to its rightful owners. We had not won everything. No one does. Our family did not gather around a table and heal in one perfect scene. Our children did not kneel and beg. The court did not turn back time. The farm did not return to being only a farm. But we slept well most nights. That mattered. We ate breakfast when we pleased. We answered the phone only when we wanted. Elaine planted ferns along the porch rail the following spring, not because she was recreating the old place, but because she liked ferns, and no one had the right to make her surrender small beauties. I kept the blue-taped motel key in the top drawer of my workbench. Deborah had told me to throw it away. I did not. Some men keep trophies. I keep reminders. That key reminds me that we were left by the road and still found a door. It reminds me that charity can arrive wearing a faded motel polo. It reminds me that paper can be used to erase a person, but it can also be used to bring him back. Most of all, it reminds me that quiet justice is not always loud enough for the people who hurt you to hear. Sometimes it is only this: a small porch, a clean light, a wife beside you, your own name on your own mailbox, and a night peaceful enough to sleep through. Sometimes justice does not give us back the home we lost, the trust that was broken, or the family we thought we had, but it can give us something quieter and stronger. The right to stand upright again, to protect our peace, and to stop letting other people use love as a signature they can cash. Russell and Elaine learned that a home is not just land, walls, or old memories. Home is where your dignity is safe. In everyday life, may we remember this. Helping others is beautiful, but losing yourself to keep people happy is not love. It is surrender. And sometimes, by God's grace, the smallest door opens at the right time: a kind stranger, a hidden paper, a quiet truth, and that is enough to begin again. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and consider subscribing for more stories of quiet justice, healing, and peace after betrayal. May you and your home be protected, and may peace find you even after the hardest goodbye.